Hi everyone. This is my video blog on spiritual integration, and at the outset, I would like to say that I have read Daniel 2020 textbook in its entirety. I will also add that I found it very helpful in answering some of the questions I had even prior to starting my master's program. Daniel 2020 helped rid me of some cynical thoughts about the uncomfortable positions I might find myself in as a counselor and a Christian. So going right into it, identify one ethical principle or standard for the ACA Code of Ethics that is in harmony with your personal and or spiritual beliefs. Then briefly state what the harmony between the principle and or standard and your personal beliefs look like. So non-maleficence is what I chose. Non-maleficence is the ethical principle that is now in harmony with my Christian beliefs. I wouldn't have been able to say this at the beginning of the course. Non-maleficence is defined by the ACA Code of Ethics as avoiding actions that cause harm. Daniel's 2020 expounded on this to include the great power we have as counselors, namely the power we have over our clients. This should come as no surprise with the serious legal consequences that exist for acting in unethical behaviors. Non-maleficence and my Christian beliefs exist in harmony because both promote the well-being of individuals and discourage harm. Christian teachings emphasize the importance of respecting the worth and dignity of each person. I think of James 4:17, which states, "So whoever knows the right thing to do and fails to do it, for him it is sin." I think this perfectly sums up the harmony I have and will continue to find in non-maleficence. Number three, next, briefly explain how the principle or standard in your personal beliefs came into harmony. Describe what this process was like for you. What challenges or conflicts did you face when trying to integrate or reconcile the principle or standard in your personal beliefs? And how did Daniel's 2020 textbook challenge your thinking? So before reading Daniel's 2020 and the material in Counseling 501, I would have said non-maleficence would be the easiest to abide by the ACA's 6 ethical principles. Do not harm is a pretty simple thing to follow. And if I'm being completely honest, it would not have been at the forefront of my mind. Prior to this class, I held the belief that non-maleficence was already ingrained in me and was something I could demonstrate without conscious thought. After all, who intends to do harm? As I read Chapter 3 of Daniel's 2020, the author made points that facilitated my reappraisal of what non-maleficence meant, specifically power. I, as a counselor, hold all the power with the education and training that I will receive. Another way non-maleficence can be violated is through countertransference, as discussed in Chapter 3 video. Countertransference is an example of violating non-maleficence because you are projecting your own problems or opinions onto the client. I would have never thought this to be the case of causing harm to a client. Another example in my research came from Carlin 2020, where hope and non-maleficence were studied. The author underscores their key point, which is, quote, associating hope with the future alone can be a form of harm because such talk, whether of progress or cure, can devalue the lives of or persons living with a particular disability. This was incredibly poignant as I can directly relate. And of course, there is A4A of the ACA Code of Ethics, which states counselors act to avoid harming their clients, trainees, and research participants, and to minimize and or to remedy unavoidable or unanticipated harm. After reading Daniel's 2020 and the research I did for this paper, non-maleficence is now more congruent with my own beliefs. Number 4 was identify one ethical or moral principle or standard from the ACA Code of Ethics that currently remains in conflict with your personal and or spiritual beliefs. Briefly describe the conflict that you have to still work through. For me, this is veracity. Veracity is the ethical principle I find that conflict still remains. Veracity is defined by the ACA Code of Ethics as dealing truthfully with the individuals with whom counselors come in contact with. I think of veracity in a sense where I still have conflict at is me compromising my authentic self, and I will get into this. So I know this principle encompasses in part being honest when dealing with records and your professional conduct as a whole. However, I initially and partially do think that why should I forsake the principle of veracity, namely being my authentic self, to ensure respect for my client's autonomy? Yet after reading Daniel's 2020, the question changed. Now I ask myself, which is more important? Never compromising any part of who I am, or providing the best counseling experience I can, beneficence and autonomy. I am not becoming a counselor so that I can have patients validate who I am. I am becoming a counselor because I want to help people in the limitless ways counseling offers. I am becoming a counselor who facilitates beneficence, but I have to work through my initial reaction that is rooted in my ego. Finally, briefly state the action you will take to work through the identified conflict now that you have read Daniel 2020 textbook. Describe the process for implementing the action. So as mentioned, veracity is the principle I need to work on. I intend to work on this through the concept of ethical bracketing. As Daniel 2020, page 38 states, the process of ethical bracketing is one that exhibits a deep respect for the personhood of the client. Making this connection was very important. I interpreted ethical bracketing as making sacrifices to please the client. I think this is a common response anyone's ego or pride would have. And another very powerful line from Daniel 2020 was, to become like another is to set myself aside and willingly enter the world of another for another. I want to say that again because I tripped up on it. To become like another is to set myself aside and willingly enter the world of another for another. This is a sentence I will not forget. I would go out on a limb and say I have had above average exposure to cultures foreign to mine, and think back to my interactions. I believe I was engaged in ethical bracketing during those times. I had no desire to impose my beliefs. I was so eager to learn and experience the new culture I was visiting. While this is not an apples to apples comparison, I think ethical bracketing is a concept which I can claim proficiency at. However, this might be my own hubris talking. The true test will come from my practicum internships and my 3,000 hours as a trainee. I will respond and make corrections if my ethical bracketing is not sufficient. This will be specific feedback I will seek out. So, thank you very much, and that's all I have.